Hello and welcome to this NGWA Industry Connected video. My name is Thad Plumley and I'm the editor of Waterwell Journal. Today I'm speaking with Thom Hanna, who is a technical director of Waterwell Products and a hydrogeologist for Johnson Screens, where he works in the areas of well design, development, and well rehabilitation. Thom has written an article for the September issue of Waterwell Journal on establishing a uniform system for classifying waterwell boreholes. We're going to find out a little bit more about it today. So Thom, first, why don't you tell us how this hydrologic classification system for boreholes was developed?
Yeah, no problem. So it's actually quite a mouthful. The guide for using the hydrogeologic classification system for waterwell boreholes, but we're all products of our background, and I was taught by, I had a mentor that beat into me, you should really describe what your article, book, or whatever's about so people know right off the get-go. So yeah, it's a way that we can now catalog and describe cuttings from waterwell boreholes in a uniform manner. I think one of the biggest issues in the waterwell industry, and I love doing this in classes, one of the first questions I'll ask is, has anybody looked at somebody else's borehole log? And everybody says yes. And then I said, how many people are required to make these? And everybody's hand goes up and they say, yes, I'm required for this. Do you understand everybody else's borehole logs? And everybody starts laughing because they know it's very hard to interpret other people's work. And so this is an industry problem. We're required to record this information. It's part of work that we have to do to submit to the regulators. It's very important information, yet it's not done in what I feel is a manner that is that useful, and I think most professionals in the industry feel is that useful. If we have to do it, let's make it useful.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about your background that helped guide you when you started working on this?
Yeah, so I'm a hydrogeologist, and some of my first jobs, I started out on some of the lowest forms of life. That would be a mud logger on a oil rig. And so I started out by logging oil wells and doing detailed logs of geologic cuttings. Then from there, I did a lot of work in the mining industry, and again, logged a lot of cuttings and cores from boreholes. And then as a consultant, I did a lot of work in logging cuttings, again, for boreholes. And something that's unique to that is that we're logging cuttings, and in schools, people aren't taught how to log cuttings. If you go to most schools, they teach you how to look at an outcrop, log an outcrop, a hand sample, big, huge chunks of things. But what's unique to logging cuttings is a lot of it is destroyed, reworked, etc. So in a way, we have a more, we have a bigger challenge in our industry, and any industry where we're logging cuttings, is we don't have the perfect sample to describe. Plus, it might be reground. Some of it may be lost. The fines may be lost in the drilling fluids, etc. So it is a bit of a challenge, but we have to realize what we're doing and what the best data we can take away from that, so that we have a log that can be used by other people and ourselves.
Okay. Yeah, so what are the ways in which you feel this is really important to have this universal system?
Well, as I said earlier, one of the biggest problems, I think, in our industry is we collect data and then it's not of use. So if we are all using a similar methodology and describing things the same, then we understand what we're looking at. And even within your own company, I guarantee you, unless you've got a way that's set up, that people are describing things differently. I've done this with consultants, even within consulting companies. I'll go in and I'll do a brown bags lunch, and I'll bring in my samples and I'll have a lecture on how to log boreholes. And I'll say, okay, half you guys on this side of the table, you log it the way you always have. You other guys log it this way you just learned. And it's amazing. I can have 10 people sitting there, and the 5 that use the method I just taught them, all their logs correlate. The other five, you can't correlate them. And so again, we just need rules. We need a set of rules that if we do this, then it becomes meaningful. And think again, if you are going back to look at a well that maybe you completed earlier, if you have a good borehole log, that'll be some guides as to wait, what are some issues with that well? Maybe in the future, maybe it's making sand, what size sand, etc. Is it formational sand? Is it filter pack? Um, Again, we can have an idea of what the potential of that is. If we properly log the grain size, we can actually go in and very quickly calculate about what that well should make also. So there's a lot of good information. Plus, then we can correlate it.
Okay. So from the guys in the field that you have talked to, how is the system currently being used?
Yeah, great question. And so I work primarily in the Western US and Canada. And the first state province that I worked with was British Columbia. British Columbia was redoing their rules and regs and you didn't have to submit logs, and they were redoing everything. So I worked with them and they incorporated this into their system. The state of Washington early on, I'm working with the state of Colorado. There's a number of states that are adopting this. And why is that? Because the other thing is with this, it's very amenable to point and click or electronic data. So if we can put things into categories or boxes, then it becomes very easy to go into a computer program or an online database, or when you're submitting your logs, you can point and click. And now it's actually a very powerful method for logging. But again, even if I say it's a medium to fine sand and you say it's medium to coarse, we're not going to be off by that much. People aren't going to be making up their own names. You're not going to be off by that much. Yeah, there's limited colors involved, but again, the colors mean things. If it's an orange or red, it's an oxidative environment. What does that mean? It's probably shallow. We got oxygen moving through it. If it's darker materials, maybe we don't have as much oxygen involved and oxygenated in the water. So there's a lot of information here. It can be general, but yet very powerful. Bedrock, it's going to be more general, but the descriptors, is it fractured? How hard is it? Those types of things are really going to make a big difference. But when we put these in these databases, and as contractors or water well professionals, now we're required to record this data. We're required to record it online because as states and provinces reduce their budgets, guess what? That work is coming back to us. So if we can make it easy and more powerful, that's a win-win all the way around.
Okay. And you mentioned online, and I kind of wonder if that ties into this question, and that's, let us know the ways in which you think our industry would benefit from just having, one universal system.
Well, I think one very powerful tool is it's a system that can be taught. Right now, there is none. Okay. I shouldn't say there's none. There's some very complex systems that have been used. I've used them for very detailed investigations that may require cores and so forth. But again, we're dealing with cuttings. We need to have all groundwater professionals be able to put together a good log. And I think with this methodology, you can create a very good log, whether you're a consultant, a geologist, a contractor. It's a very powerful tool, yet very easy to use. Now with this, think about it, even within your own company, you can teach people. I can teach somebody at the state level. There's people in the provinces that now teach classes on it. There's people that have taught classes on this. It's a system that can be taught by many. I've seen it used at some universities as well. So again, if everybody's out there doing their own thing, we're going to have different logs, we're not going to be able to correlate. And some of my favorite things are, again, you get what back you ask for. And what do I mean by that? So some states just have a blanket description. They say geologic description. Well, guess what? When you ask for a geologic description, you get soup to nuts. My idea of a geologic description might be different than your idea. What's important to you may not be important to me. If we've got a checklist to go through, and it's not a big checklist, but if we can go in and check those boxes off, guess what? We're going to be pretty close. And we're going to get a description that people can understand.
Okay, Tom, so for a final question, what do you think NGWA's role is in helping the industry use this tool?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question again. I've taught classes at the NGWA annual meetings, and I think that's really benefited the contractors. I think the article that's being written and this interview is another way, but I think the NGWA could be more active in reaching out to states. So my exposure again has mainly been in the Western US, but the NGWA being a farther reaching group that covers from coast to coast, it would be maybe in the best interest of the NGWA to reach out to different states and those people and help those people with how they can better create online logs.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk to us today. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.